Delighted you decided to join us today. My name is Stefano Bertuzzi. I'm the Chief Executive Officer here at ASM, and I'd like to start with you, Virginia. As ASM President, you have really stepped out in a sense of your comfort zone, of your own research, and what you do, what you've been doing your whole life, extremely successful scientist. And you have led projects that are in different areas of microbiology. And one of these projects has been looking at the role of microbes in climate change and doing and overseeing, as president, the activities at the Academy of Microbiology under various leadership of Jay Lennon and Win-Win, our director, have been doing in trying to look at the role of microbes, again, in climate change and sustainability. So tell us from your perspective the importance of this work and what was accomplished and what's to come.
Well, thank you, Stefano. So there's a lot of importance to this work, and it really relates a lot to the new strategic plan that we've talked about a little bit, and maybe some of you were at the opening session yesterday and saw the video. But a couple of our real big goals in terms of the new strategic plan is to really connect with all the stakeholders in microbiology globally, and also to use science in the service of humanity and to really try and tackle some of the big problems that we are having in the world. And climate change is a big part of that. And the Academy for Microbiology has really stepped up, and they formed a task force to really try and look at this issue and how microbes can be used to help address these problems that we have with climate change. And Jay Lennon really headed that task force and had done a terrific job. And this is a 4 to 5 year project for the Academy, actually, and I think they're just finished 2 years and have done amazing work. They've held a number of colloquia and published papers that are results of those colloquia. They've had a whole track sessions here at Microbe last year, and I think some as well this year, to really highlight some of the ideas that have come out of those meetings. And they're still working more on a lot of other things. And the other thing that they've really done too is partner with other groups like the American Geological Society, and we've also started partnering with IUMS, of which Reno is the president. And really, for us to be the most effective, we have to leverage partnerships to really have a bigger reach around the world. And so that's really what we're trying to focus on right now.
Thank you so much, Virginia. I think you hit on a really important point here, that the ASM strategic plan, strategic roadmap of really creating a space and a structure that can empower the microbiologists to really contribute in shaping what needs to come for the benefit of the world can't be done alone. And we are a large organization, but there's no way that ASM can do this and take on this thing alone. And so that's why we have here on stage, and really delighted to have Dr. Rina Rapoli, who, as I mentioned, is the president of the International Union for Microbiology Society. So, Rina, what is your interest in this space of climate change, and why do you think partnering with ASM and, as Virginia mentioned, is something that you look with interest?
Well, when I became president of the International Union of Microbiological Society, basically I asked myself, what was the role of the society? The International Union is basically a union that brings together all the microbiological society of the planet. And so far it's been it's an old union, started more or less a century ago in 1927, and it's organized meetings to bring together all the microbiologists from every 2 or 3 years. But I got the sense that we got to a point in microbiology where we need to change pace, and just organizing a meeting may not be enough. And I was looking for something where basically we could engage and excite all the microbiologists worldwide. And it's clear that today people would like not only to publish something, but to be useful for society, for the world. Basically, to do something that's going to have an impact on life. And while I was working on that, I started to see what ASM was doing, and I thought that getting together will be more effective in doing the things that more or less both of us wanted to do. So I thought that, I mean, ASM is the largest microbiological society worldwide, and working together will do much better job. And so I'm very excited about the things we are doing together, and I really hope we will help microbiology to step up and address climate change, address a lot of the problems of today's society, and I mean, for health, for the economy, and for the planet. So I think we have a lot of things to do together.
Yeah, there's no rest for the weary. Huh? And I'll get back to you in a second on the preliminary work that has already been done. But I want to get back to Virginia first, and think, Virginia, on the issue of what the Academy has already done with under the great leadership, as I mentioned, of Dr. Win-Win and Dr. Jay Lennon, has been to really try to put forward and bring at the top, the role that microbes can have in climate change, which has been largely overlooked. And if you are thinking now of, you mentioned the ASM strategic roadmap and where you're going, how do you think that this work can keep growing and become, even more rooted into what we do, and make sure that it keeps progressing and getting even stronger based on what we will do?
Well, first off, I would like to say that the work that the Academy has done with their task force on climate change and all the output that has come from that is a real example of how we feel like our new scientific units will be most effective going forward, and that they're really kind of a model that we're working from, because microbes at all levels have an impact on climate change, both positively and negatively, and we need to understand the biology of how you have carbon and nitrogen cycling and all of that, and that is found all over. So one of the really important things is when they started looking at this, and you think about the UN and their plans for addressing climate change, microbes were nowhere to be found in those documents. And so part of this is really just raising the level of the importance of microbes in trying to address these problems, because they are both contributors as well as part of the solution. And so that was a big part of that.
Thank you for mentioning the UN, and I'll come back to the SDGs and what else ASM is doing in this space. But Reno, back to you. Do you want to give us a sense, since you've been also evolving toward climate change and microbe, which was not your original background, but in the work that you've been doing, if you want to tell us about the strategic advisory group that was put together within ASM and IUMS, and what do you see as emerging, the main themes that are emerging there that we should be bringing forward to emphasize the role of microbes in sustainability and climate change issues?
Well, as you said, we set up a joint scientific advisory group, 12 people from all trying to get the best from the different disciplines around the world. And we're having several meetings, and the idea is to come up with actionable solutions, short-term, that actually we can show the microbes actually can make the difference. And we basically concentrated on three top things. One is obviously greenhouse gases, how microbes can help to reduce the production and can actually use them and reduce the greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. So that's one thing. The other thing is how microbes can impact health, the human microbiome, and then obviously the obvious things they already do, making vaccines, making pharmaceuticals, but we started to go about using microbes as drugs. I mean, to replace kind of damaged microbiome to, we know about fecal transplantation, so these kind of things. And the third thing is about microbes and the environment. I mean, obviously the biodiversity is deteriorating in soil, in water, and so what can we do as with microbes basically to make sure that, I mean, we can replace and or reduce the reduction of biodiversity, but at the same time also today we can engineer microbes basically to maybe to fix back the nitrogen so we can have plenty of contribute to I mean to produce enough food for the people, avoiding chemical fertilizers. How we can, I mean, one of the things we are talking about, how can microbes repair basically the corals that are bleaching because of the microbial diversity. And there are people that actually are very good microbiologists that are actually making synthetic, well, artificial collection of microbes that basically repair the microbiome of the corals, and actually it seems to work. So basically there are a lot of things we can do, and what we're trying to do is basically to, in these three different things, we got different experts, and we are trying to say, well, there are a lot of things we can do in the long term, but actually which are the actionable things that we can do, we have an impact in the short term. And that's what we would like to do. And the idea is basically to convince the policymakers that basically microbes can really help to solve a lot of the problems of today. At the same time, also to convince microbiologists that we can actually step up, raise our voice, because we actually can make a big difference if we work together in this direction. If we focus on the things that can be done and we can contribute now.
I like that a lot, Reno, and it looks like that in what you said, there are essentially two target audiences of what you are envisioning. One is us, the microbiologists, and really working and energizing, putting some ATP into the equation, that this is really an important issue, and put energy in this direction. And the second audience is like the policymaker, and we'll get to that, because one of the things at ASM that we are very proud of and where we have invested significant resources has been our advocacy and lobbying program led by Alan Siegel and his wonderful team. And they stand ready to receive these recommendations from the work that Reno and IUMS is doing, and saying, if this, as I like that you emphasize a lot, I use a lot the word actionable, because this group of scientists that IUMS and ASM brought together, we tasked them as saying, tell us what are, I use the word three because maybe it's my Catholic background that thinks in Trinity, but what are the three issues, biggest issue that really help, that we should be focusing on, and what do you think as scientists will need to help in order to remove those roadblocks and open paths. And so we really look forward to receiving those recommendations, because then we stand ready to advocate with the United Nations and with other groups to really make sure that there is evidence-based policies that can be put in place to do that. And United Nations, I want to go back to you, Virginia, even moving beyond the climate change issues, because ASM has been thinking and working about UN Sustainable Development Goals in other areas as well. Do you want to share something about that?
Well, certainly there's things like food security and pandemic preparedness issues that ASM and microbes certainly can play a big role in trying to develop solutions or thinking about solutions going forward.
Yeah, and also on the publishing side,
yes,
I was thinking
and so,
the compact. Yeah.
We recently, the ASM Journal signed on to the UN Sustainable Development Goals Publishers Compact, which is really a great way for us to engage and start publishing papers and support for these kinds of development of these goals.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we believe in what I call the surround sound. And it's really important when you try to introduce change at this scale, not to have just one-off initiatives, right? And so having ASM is one of the largest publishers in the world of microbiology, and so having our journals focused on the UN Sustainable Development Goals and say, how can we create collection of articles, special issues, commit to activities that are actually directed toward moving the needle on these very challenging issues. It's something that we think will help lift all the boats, including the climate change work that we're doing with the IUMS. So we're really excited and really proud about this. This is not picking early wins or easy wins, because it really takes really a lot of effort, and no success is really guaranteed. Reno, going back to the climate change activities in there, why do you think, as you started exploring this from the IUMS side, why do you think that the UN, the COP meetings, which this year was slightly different perhaps, but not much, and in general, microbes have been absent from this conversation? Are we really, is this really the microbiologists who say, hey, microbes are important, or do you think that is the others have just forgotten about it?
Well, probably microbes are too small and people don't see them. But but no, actually is amazing, because since I started to look, all the COP meetings, all the international meetings, the United Nations meetings, they talk about climate change, they talk about biodiversity. But if you look there, microbes are not there. So one reason probably is because we microbiologists are too shy. And so I think we need to start to raise the voice, start to understand that we are important, we can make contributions, basically really raise our voice and be present. I think we have a social responsibility that I think is a responsibility for the planet, I think for the entire population that we bear, and we need to do something. So I think the first action is for us. And then the rest, I think, is a combination of factors. Today's economy is based on fossil fuels, and all the money, everything goes there. And everything comes from chemical reactions. The big things are all done like this. So basically, we are not present in the big money economy. So we are not really part of it. And all the other people don't know what we can do. That's why we really need to stand up and raise the voice and tell them. That's why we want to say these are the three things we can do now, and this is the difference we can make in a sustainable way. Most of the people don't know about that. So I think it's a number of factors, but that we need to change.
Yeah, and this is really it's really complex, but one of the core values that we talk about in our organization is that of science in service, and I think that there is also a sequence in the sentence, right? Science for us comes first, so we need to understand what the problem is. We need to understand what the possible solutions are, and that's what this group that we put together between ASM and IUMS is trying to address from a scientific perspective. But then, and I don't want to insult anyone, but as scientists, I put myself in there as well as a former bench scientist, we typically tend to think, okay, now let's move on and publish the next paper, right? Because that's what we do. But I think that as an organization, what we need also to sensitize it, the second part of you were saying, that we need to do the science and find out that's our job. But then as an organization, it is important to take that evidence, and putting it to work, for society, for solving the problems that people are confronted with and the planet will be. And that's why we think, and I'm going back to Virginia with our strategic roadmap, that's why we think that our construct that starts from the science first, but but doesn't stop there. I don't know if you got the same question, Virginia, that people stop me all around and says, well, but in your strategic roadmap, you don't talk about policy, you don't talk about education. Why have you forgotten about that? Do you want to respond to that? But
We have definitely not forgotten about education and policy and publishing or any of those things. Those are the tactical parts of the organization. So when we have our scientific units who think about what are the issues, what's going forward in that area of science, what does it need, then that goes out to these tactical units. That's when we need to publish a paper, or if we need to start advocacy, or we need to convene a meeting to bring together stakeholders to address this particular problem or the solution that we're trying to put forward, whether it's to bring in a bioengineer or a geologist or whatever you need for that. That's part of what we would do by convening meetings, and as well as publishing or advocacy or education, really trying to raise awareness of new areas of research that are exciting and that young people may really want to get on board with, right? So that's kind of how we're thinking. Whereas before we used to be very service-centric. Everybody would touch ASM in a different way, maybe just a small part, maybe they just did the meetings, maybe they just use ASM to publish the papers or go to a webinar. But this way, all of those things are in service of the science that we are driving.
And this is really a difficult aspect because it goes back, what you said, Virginia, to also what Reno was saying is, there is the aspect of the science audience and understanding what we can do. And then there is taking it, and putting it out there. Otherwise, you need both components. And as scientists in our own labs or so, what we do is the first part. And we need to stick to that. But it's the role of association like IUMS, ASM, and many other, AGU, and whatever else we're going to partner with to really create that infrastructure that brings together the other components, the other stakeholders, because it's not that just the scientists can take it from soup to nuts, so to speak. And so that is interesting because when we think of putting together all these actions, if we don't have the whole enchilada of this, then either the policymakers won't hear us because they're not in our circuit, or we end up talking only to each other, and we can make incredible contribution, but they really don't get to determine what policies are. And so I think that what we're trying to do here may be difficult, but I think it's really, really important, and it goes in the direction of where we think the society could be as well. So besides climate change, I'm going to expand a little bit more because it's not just that. This is probably a problem that is common to other things. Reno, you are leading now in Italy the Pandemic Preparedness Center. So I think that the experience with the pandemic, in a sense, should teach us something also for climate change, right? When we first found ourselves in the pandemic, we scientists knew that the way out of that would have been through science. It would have been through generating immunity in the community, and that could have been in many different ways. But science would have guided us there. Yet, I think several of us had the concern that scientists may not have come out that well out of this experience, which is an extremely frustrating experience because we thought if you only would understand, what this is. And so to me, this goes to the issue of how we as scientists connect with society in order to put our knowledge and our experience at work in a way that is part of society as an integrated and not us teaching at them. So from the pandemic experience, and I'm going to ask also your opinion on this because I think we're running up against time, but Rena, for you that you straddle climate change and pandemic preparedness, do you see the parallel that I just made, and what lessons should we keep in mind as we embark in these activities on climate change, not to repeat the errors that maybe were made during the pandemic by science communication and science engagement?
Well, I think that one important thing we should do is really communicate well and write papers, not only on deep science, but also the implication of the science for journals and for things which are beyond the the journals of just for microbiologists. So I think white papers, trying to, and even papers that will be educational. I mean, not going to the details, but showing the big vision. That's very important. So, that's what we try to do with the IUMS. We started to publish papers. I mean, one of it was a white paper saying, save the microbes to save the planet. I mean, something that will basically appeal to not only to the microbiologists, but also outside of it. And then one thing which is very important that is common to vaccines and climate is that when you talk to policymakers, economy is very important. And in vaccines, we learned that we wanted people to basically to adopt vaccines, and we will talk to the Ministry of Health. And we spent many years talking to the Minister of Health, and nothing was happening. And then we realized that we need to talk to the Minister of Finance, because that's the one that gives the budget to the Minister of Health. So if the Minister of Finance doesn't understand it, you don't go anywhere. So in climate, it's exactly the same thing. That's why in the scientific advisory group, we put an economist, because he has to listen to all of us and translate that into something that's going to be understood to people that don't speak our language, but the ones that make the decisions. So we need to translate basically our words, our problems, our things in a language that people outside are going to listen and they can understand. And that language is completely different than the one we use among us. So that's what we need to learn. If you want to be listened, if you want to have an influence, we need to bring other people to our meetings. And in vaccines, I'm basically saying that 50% of the people in vaccine meetings should be economists. It's pushing a little bit the envelope, but I really mean that. If they don't see that and they don't translate what we need, the power of the things we can do into the language of the ministries and the policymakers, we will never make it. So I think we need to be open beyond what we do and basically learn how to communicate.
Thank you. That's very powerful. Virginia, what do you think on this topic?
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. I think all of that is true. We need to do that, but we also need to communicate to our communities in a different way as well, and that is to not stand up here and lecture to them, this is how this works, this is how this vaccine works, this is why you have to use it, but rather start from a point of their interest, which is what is your question, what concerns you, and then try about this topic, and then try to, communicate by a dialogue with them about what is important and what you need to know and what you need to think about in trying to evaluate what is good for you and your family and for your community. So it's a different level of communication, but we definitely need to work at all these different levels of communication.
Thank you. This is really, really great, and we're up against time. And if I could summarize perhaps what both of you just said here in a slight different way, is I think it would be really, really effective if we can create a culture in the scientific community, and we should try with ASM and the microbiology, where we are very steep in evidence and science and rigor and reproducibility in our own community and do the real hard science in a very responsible way, but always keep, on the other hand, in mind the concept that when we talk to the people, we should say, we work for you. That it's not that we separate ourselves as teachers and telling them, we know the answer and this is how you do. This comes across often as a colonialist, right? And so all the work that you've done, the hard work that you've done, which we know it's hard and it's there, may crumble. And the attitude of say, I work for you and I'm here, science is here to help what we're doing and we're in this together, I think it's what I heard from both of you. And I think it's hard sometimes because as scientists, we talk to the brain, but when we talk to people, we need to get to the brain, to the heart, because otherwise we just go over their heads. No pun with the anatomy here. And so thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation, but even more, I hope that you will find way of engaging with the activities of IUMS and ASM on climate change and all the rest that will come in trying to tackle these big problems where microbes are really the crux, and we'll try to make sure that not just microbiologists understand that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.